So welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a good lunch. A couple of things I want to just bring to your attention before we begin. This morning when I was talking about that survey that I was going to send out about the public service loan forgiveness, I was mistaken. I thought that the survey was geared towards individuals to respond to. As I went to send it out, I realized that it's actually geared for an entire office. So what I did is I emailed it to the county attorneys, but I'm having Marilyn, email the survey to your support staff. And we need to have one person in each office gather the data. And so please, when your support staff come to you to find out about, if you're participating or have participated in the PSLF, that's why it's coming from them. And please respond to that. A couple of trainings I wanted to bring your attention to is starting next week, Trent and Tyson will be traveling the state doing the legislative update. It'll be an abbreviated version of what they're doing here today. It will be geared towards your law enforcement officers, so please encourage your cops to attend. But if you've got prosecutors, other attorneys in your office that weren't able to come today and want to see that, they're more than welcome, and the schedule is on our webpage. If you have not heard about our virtual trial skills class, this is being taught by Blair Wardle. It is phenomenal. If you want to learn PowerPoint to use in all aspects of your trial, please sign up for those courses. We're doing them 4 times a year. We limit it to about 10 folks per class, and we usually have a waiting list for each class, so I'd encourage you to do that. And then the last thing I wanted to tell you about is, so it's been 10 years since we've done our last advanced trial skills course. So we are doing one in October. It's like the 22nd to the 25th. I think approximate dates is going to be down in St. George. The fact pattern is going to be a sexual assault case, but if you don't prosecute sexual assault, don't let that deter you. But it will be an advanced trial skills course, and so we are excited to finally have an advanced trial skills course that we're offering. We are going to cap that class at 30. And registration is open now, so the sooner you can get registered, you can secure your spot. Excuse me. So with that, let me introduce our next 2 speakers. Tyson Skeen aspires to one day retire and take up fishing full time. He only needs 3 more years before he starts thinking like a fish. Unfortunately, it will be much longer than that before his ultimate dreams are realized. While he prepares for that future calling, he currently works for the Utah Prosecution Council as the Utah Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor, where he serves as the state's subject matter expert in impaired driving issues. He's been in that position since January of 2016. He has trained thousands of prosecutors, police officers, and other impaired driving advocates all around the country, and is recognized for his expertise in top-level shoe game. Just ask him about how many pairs of Air Jordans he owns. Okay, Trent Dressen has been with UPC since October of 2023. As a sex assault DV resource prosecutor, he also provides training to law enforcement, advocates, support staff, and support staff, primarily centered in domestic violence and sex assault investigations. Prior to joining to UPC, Trent spent 18 years serving in various roles in the criminal justice system as well as the military. He's downplaying that. He was a SWAT officer, SWAT commander, investigator. He's done lots of cool stuff. Trent's been married for 6 years to his beautiful, high-achieving wife, has an awesome autistic 5-year-old son, and a 2-year-old precocious daughter. He loves spending time with his kids, trying to stay in shape and learning new things. At the wise age of 40, Trent has finally let go of his ego and has begun buying his clothes at Costco. So with that, let me turn it over to Trent and Tyson. See, I knew there was going to be a glitch. I pressed the space bar, guys. It's not working.
Go back one more. You had one job, Bob.
I am pushing the damn space button.
Just push it once.
Oh, I was impatient.
Go.
Can y'all imagine if prosecutors had walk-up songs? As you walk into the courtroom, you get to choose the song that plays. Coincidentally, one day I go into Tyson's office. I was like, what would your walk-up song be? And almost at the same time, we're like, Johnny Chascott, gonna cut you down. And here we are.
Here we are.
This is the type of dumb crap that Tyson and I sit around and think about. What would your walk-up song be as a prosecutor? But God, it's a good one.
But we do it all for you. That's why we do it. Okay, let's get into this. Almost everybody here has been to one of our legislative updates before. You've seen these in the past. If this is your first one, I'm sorry ahead of time, but we'll make it through this. There are some considerations that we want you to have in place as we get going on this, okay? But before I get into that, I really want to put a plug in for this legislative process, all right? And we've talked about this before in the past, but it merits talking about it again. We have a lot of people that are involved in legislation throughout the state. I'm looking at Megan right now. She was very involved in the legislative session this session. And there are many others in the room who were as well. There used to be a day where prosecutors could send one prosecutor up to the Capitol and say, you're going to do all of our bidding, you're going to go up there, and it was very, very successful. Those days are long gone, all right? And we get questions often. Trent and I, we get to go around the state. Like Bob mentioned, we're going to go around the state the next 3-4 weeks, and we're going to train in virtually every single county. Some counties we combine, some of our smaller counties we combine. But we're going to train law enforcement in every single county in this state over the next 4 weeks. And we often get questions about, well, why did this happen? Or you might reach out to me and say, Tyson, that's the dumbest law that ever passed. Why did you do that? And I'm like, well, I didn't do it, for one, okay? But then my question is always, why didn't you come to a meeting, right? There's SWAT meetings, there's SWAT black meetings throughout the year, throughout the legislative session especially, and we need more people to be involved. We need more prosecutors who are involved in those meetings, who are willing to come and testify at the Hill, who are willing today to start reaching out to your legislative members that are in your areas right now and forming those relationships so that when something crazy happens on the Hill, you can make a call and be like, Representative so-and-so, we need a favor here. We need you to step in and stop this. Senator so-and-so, we need you to go in and influence this or push this forward. This is going to be a close call. We need your help. But those relationships start now. They don't start in January and February. And so as you listen and you talk about, and we talk about legislation, undoubtedly there's going to be legislation where you're sitting here scratching your head and you're going to say, Tyson, why did you do that? And I will say, I didn't do it. Okay? But then my response will probably be to most of the people in this room, why didn't you come to the meeting? Right? We need you. We need you to be involved. We need you to be a part of things. Jeff Buman, the director of SWAP, will be here tomorrow morning, and he's going to talk a little bit to us and give a little bit more information about what they're doing and advocating on your behalf. But we need more people to be involved, okay? That's my pitch for being involved, because the defense bar is very well organized on these things, and they're very well funded on these things as well. They've gotten some really, really important relationships with legislators that they're able to push a lot of things, okay? So just be aware of that. We have battles on the Hill, but if we want good policy, we have to be involved. So that's kind of my pitch for SWAP. Now diving into our presentation here. There is no substitute for you actually going in and reading the law. You're going to say, Tyson told me this, and maybe I'm making this up today, guys. You'll never know unless you go read the bill. So you're going to have to take some time and read these things. But there is absolutely no substitute for you going in and reading the law and understanding what it says. We're going to give you a quick primer on these things. We're going to explain as much detail as we can to be able to go through all this. But you've got to understand it as well, okay? As we're going through these, unless otherwise indicated, the implementation date generally for this session is May 7th. So we're a couple weeks out from that. There are some that are already in effect, and there are some that have some delayed implementation. We'll try to point that out as we get there. Page numbers on the summaries are going to be in the top left corner, unless they're in a different corner, as it says on the slide. But actually, for this presentation, they all got to fit in the top left corner. So we're good on that. We're actually making it a little bit easier on you this year. We were able to convince our training committee to give us a little bit more time. For the legislative update, we've never been able to actually finish what we'd prepared. There's always more than we had. And so we've always prioritized and said we're going to talk about the most important bills first, and that means we're out of order. Today we're going to start with the House bills, and we're going to go in chronological order up. And so if you're following along in the materials, it should be a lot easier to be able to follow along with those summaries as we go. Anything I'm leaving out, Trent?
No. Well done.
Black Cat Jordan 3s right now, if anybody's wondering.
So the reason this whole walk-up song theme even came about is halfway through the legislative session, I started realizing that with a lot of these bills, there were songs coming to mind, as if these bills had walk-up songs. So we want you guys to kind of play along. We might have some trivia associated with the songs we've assigned to each of these bills. And Tyson and I would love to have lunch with whoever gets the most of these on Tyson.
On me.
So keep track, see how well you do. First up, House Bill 13, Sexual Extortion Amendments.
Jam. This is your jam, Nelly.
This, of course, is sung by Taylor Swift. The song is called Good. I'm telling you, I trained some police chiefs earlier this week, and they were so embarrassed to admit they knew who sung this song and what the title was. Faker's gonna fake, fake, fake. A lot of bill amendments based on AI. Sexual extortion now includes counterfeit, intimate images. Over the last year, there were actually multiple cases where people used AI images to extort someone, occasionally ended in awful consequences. Representative Wilcox talks about a few people who ended their lives based on these AI images. Now we have this update so we can prosecute those if counterfeit intimate images are used to extort.
Oh, nothing's working. What says child labor laws more than a picture of my teenage daughter taking orders at Swig? It's not creepy if it's your kid and you take the picture of them in line, right? If it's your own kid, you can get away with it. But other than Snow White whistling while we work, right? House Bill 19. This is a bill that creates some new laws with child labor laws. Violations of these things, the first is a Class B misdemeanor, a second is a Class A misdemeanor, a third offense is a third-degree felony. And there was actually some concern when this bill went through that you're going to start penalizing, charging people with a felony that just, maybe innocently violated one of these child labor laws. The intent behind this legislation is really to start hitting these organized crime units that are trafficking in labor, right? There's a bunch of reporting requirements that if your law enforcement learns about this, they actually have to report it to SBI, who will come in and do a full investigation on it to figure out if there's more to it than just a single violation of a child labor law. They're going to come in and do a much deeper dive and investigation using their resources and expertise. And so be aware of that, and don't be afraid to whistle while you work. All right. Go ahead. People lie and people cheat, and I'm not saying that the legislature lies and cheats. Okay, that's not the point of this. But things aren't always what they seem. All right? We know over the last several years there's been this large effort to recodify Utah code, right? The Utah criminal code. And we've been going kind of section by section as we go through. And they've been very, very careful to adhere to the principle. We're not trying to substantively change any law. We're just trying to recodify. And we're going to have the definitions in that subsection 1, elements in subsection 2, penalties in subsection 3, and then miscellaneous 4 on, right? And they've done a good job with that. But when I went into AI and I asked AI to create me a picture of a whole bunch of random crap that didn't have anything to do with each other, that's what came up. And I thought, that is a perfect picture of the recodification bills this year. Because it wasn't just the recodification of Title 76.9, which is a lot of it was, and 10. There's others, and Trent's going to talk about House Bill 22. I'll talk about House Bill 128 in more detail later. But in addition to the recodification, there's actually quite a few new statutes that got put into this in the recodification efforts. So it's not always what it seems. I'm going to tell you a few examples of these. I won't be able to tell you everything. Here's the thing. This bill was almost 26,000 lines. It's a massive bill, 765 pages. Aiding and abetting a minor to distribute pornographic material is a new offense. Aiding and abetting a minor to distribute harmful materials to a minor. There's some new offenses for gangs. Accepting proceeds of unlawful activity. Failure to report a dead body for everybody now is a crime. Unlawful creation or installation of a contraband compartment is a third-degree felony. So if you're creating a contraband compartment in your car, you could get charged with a third-degree felony. Unlawful body piercing of a minor is in the recodification efforts. Class B misdemeanor. So if you're body piercing a minor, that doesn't go to the mutilation, the genitalia mutilation we talked about several years ago that happens, that can happen. So just be aware of it. There's a lot in there. This is a giant bill. A lot of those offenses against the government, against society, right, that don't have victims in them, have been recodified, and there's an effort there. So the numbers are all going to be different. But there are some new offenses that went along with that as well.
House Bill 22. Forever Young, sung by Rod Stewart. So House Bill 22, part of the recodification, but they actually took some prostitution offenses and made some adjustments. They took prostituting an individual who is an adult and child and separated them instead of making them one offense. If it is an adult, it's an MA, but now they made it so that if you have 2 priors instead of 3, it's an F3. Additionally, if it's a child, it's still an F2, but what they did is went through and made it so that offenders who are under the age of 18, we now have this Romeo and Juliet gap for them patronizing a prostituted individual who is a child. Thus, some of our minors may want to be forever young to get lesser offenses in patronizing prostitutes. Is that a stretch? Forever young?
No, fits perfectly.
Okay, perfect.
I like it.
Thank you. I see.
You're my people if you're doing this. And you might be wondering what 50 Cent has to do with this bill, House Bill 38. Well, you used to be a wanksta if all you could do is get 2 people to go in concert with you. But now you're a gangsta, all right, when it comes to that. The gang enhancement always required in concert with 3 or more persons. That's what the bill has been, what the law has been before. They've reduced that to 2. So we can get the gang enhancement easier now in concert with 2 or more persons. They also have a new definition of organized criminal group that these same things fit into. So they're broadening where we can get that old school gang enhancement on these things, all right? This bill really goes after 3 areas. The first one is the gangs, and there's a lot in the gangs. It increases penalties for soliciting, enticing people to join gangs, intimidating people to stay in gangs. There's enhancements for all those things. So if you're seeing the gang activity and people involved in that, recruiting minors to come into gangs, there's all sorts of enhancements along those lines. So just be aware of that. Be with that. The organized crime group, here's the definition. It has the commission of criminal offenses as one of the group's purposes, and the members collectively engage in committing crimes for the financial or other material benefit of the members of the group. So if you can meet that, even if you don't have that in concert with 2 or more persons, you can still get the enhancements under this organized criminal group. All right. The next place is it attacks theft crimes, and various theft crimes can now have the gang enhancement. All right. So if you go in there and you look, These theft crimes, the gang enhancement can apply to them, and it's under these conditions. Acted in concert with 2 or more people, and one of the following. Traveled more than 50 miles from a principal place of residence to commit the offense. They like these traveling bills this session, don't they, Trent?
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk more about that later. Or has been previously convicted of any of the same offenses that they had done that. So if they're in concert with 2 or more persons, they have a prior conviction, we can use that gang enhancement on these offenses now. Theft priors can come from out of state. We used to only be able to count Utah theft priors for enhancing purposes. But if there's a theft from out of state that's similar to what it would have been here in Utah, we can count those for enhancement purposes as we move forward. And the same goes for prostitution. If they have prostitution, and that's kind of the third area where this one hit, kind of a hodgepodge of different criminal offenses, gangs, thefts, and prostitution that we get there. But if somebody has prostitution priors from another state or a similar offense that would have been an offense here, we can use that for enhancement purposes here on our prostitution offenses as well.
House Bill 49. MJ. Song is called Man in the Mirror. The legislature believes in change. They believe that it shouldn't just be people who have had felonies expunged that can serve on juries, but even if you've had a felony reduced to a misdemeanor. So that previously made someone ineligible, it does no longer. However, if they were convicted of the same offense that you're trying, that would make them ineligible. So keep that in mind as you're evaluating potential jurors. Just because they had a felony, if it was reduced, they may be eligible now where they were not previously.
You might be asking yourself, is this a picture of Tyson in his teenage years and his friends having bottle rocket wars in cars in the church parking lot? And the answer would be no. But this is what AI gave me when I asked them to give me that image. So it's pretty dang close. All right? So let's talk about litter cleanup, House Bill 53. This deals with the offense of throwing a lighted material from a vehicle. All right, that offense is no longer an infraction. Throwing a lighted material from a vehicle is now a Class C misdemeanor. So get ready for your jury trials on this. It's going to be awesome in your justice courts doing jury trials on these things. And a lighted material, the definition was clarified, is an item that is flaming, burning, or smoking, including lighted charcoal, fireworks, matches, tobacco, cigars, or cigarettes. And the one we usually see this on, right, is somebody throwing their burnt cigarette out the windows or going down the road. And I used to have a judge that would ask somebody anytime they'd have this offense is, why do you think you get to treat the world like it's your personal ashtray? Right? And he would give them a good strong lecture and then not do anything about it because it was an infraction. But now, 90 days in jail, baby, here we go.
Heck yeah. House Bill 66. Who sings this song? Gloria Gaynor. House Bill 66, ritual abuse amendments. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Prior to last year and the initial push for ritual abuse to become an aggravating factor in the statute, I didn't know much about it. It's the type of thing that the more you learn about it, the more horrific you find out it is. Since this has been passed, I've had the chance to sit down with a couple of survivors, and this is the type of thing that you hear and don't want to believe because of how horrific it is. These survivors are really, really resilient, and they really, really want their cases to be taken seriously, and they had the opportunity this year to get this passed. So ritual abuse is now an aggravating factor on any type of abuse case, physical or sexual. They also added a definition for it. So ritual means an event or act marked by specific actions, gestures, ceremonial objects, clothing, texts, or specific words. If you have that associated with any type of abuse and the judge makes a finding of that on the record, it's going to become an aggravating factor on these types of cases. In addition to that, we're going to add a component to our 3-day advanced sexual assault investigation course that includes how to identify ritual abuse, so that hopefully you'll start seeing it in reports well investigated when that is a component.
So I've got a 12-year-old that loves Halloween. And she made me create a Halloween playlist that she gets to listen to for the month of October every year. And this song was on it. So that's why I'm familiar with this song. I'm going to give you a hypothetical. And this is strictly a hypothetical. Okay? Let's pretend that there's a county clerk. Let's just pick a random elected official that doesn't like mail-in voting, so they decide their county's no longer going to do prepaid postage for mail-in voting. And there's some other elected officials in that same county that say, you know what, it's actually state law that if you put your ballot in the mail, the post office has to deliver it, and then the county has to pay for it anyways. And they go out on their social media and they let everybody know. Again, this is strictly a hypothetical. Then the county clerk, as kind of like a genius move, decides to go and look up what those various elected officials, how they submitted their ballot, and post them to the public. Again, if this has any similarity to any real events, it's purely coincidental. This is strictly a hypothetical. House Bill 69 now makes that illegal for this hypothetical county clerk to do this. They have defined what a voting history record is, and has protected what a voting history record is under the grandma statute and under protected records. And if anyone, any government official goes in and looks at those and discloses those, especially those protected voting history records, that's now a Class B misdemeanor just to do so. So again, somebody came up with a hypothetical. Nothing like that would obviously ever happen in this county, certainly. Yeah, there we go.
You have really detailed hypotheticals.
I spend a lot of time thinking about these things.
House Bill 78.
When your legs don't work like they used to before, and I can't sweep you off of your feet.
This song, of course, is sung by, and the name of the song is Thinking Out Loud. The legislature wants judges and prosecutors to do more of this. So in 76-3-406, we have a list of offenses that cannot be granted probation unless it's an attempt. And now if a judge does grant probation on an attempt, they have to say on the record why that's in the interest of justice and explains how that particular actor does not pose a significant safety risk. So they have to make that finding on the record, but that doesn't exempt us. If we offer a plea deal that lowers one of those types of cases a degree, we have to say on the record, this was in the interest of justice. Megan, am I missing something?
It was. They did a great job of getting that down. So,
fantastic job. I'm going to do some shout outs throughout this. Having watched the hearings, tons of people did a lot of great stuff. This was awful. And I know David had a big part of it. Megan had a part in this, trying to figure out how we can make it so that we're not having to stand up and call out the victim or stand up and talk about the horrible investigations that Officer so-and-so just did. So this is in a really good place. Just recognize this came a long way, and now we've just got to say it's in the interest of justice.
and he gets to front for it again. Again, the people who wanted to raise their hand right there and start doing some of this, you're my people. All right? And I know you're out there. You're just being a little reserved. But by the end of this presentation, at the end of the day, everyone's going to be rocking out here, I promise. So what are we not going to take anymore? All right? This is what we're not going to take anymore. Okay? House Bill 80, disorderly conduct amendments. There is a new offense of aggravated disorderly conduct on a street or a highway. Okay? And this is anytime we have people that are intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly obstructing vehicle or pedestrian traffic on a highway, which is any of our streets, right? But the highway has to meet a very specific definition. It's not just any road. It's a road where the speed limit is 40 miles per hour or higher, and it has 2 lanes of travel going in the same direction. Okay? So we have some of those around here in these parts. But if it's just a 2-lane road going the other way, no matter what the speed limit is, it's not there. But that's the roads that qualify. So if you have a road that's like that and people are obstructing pedestrian or vehicle traffic, all right, and they refuse to comply with a lawful order to move by law enforcement. I told you, we're not going to take this crap anymore, guys. All right, this is pretty serious stuff. In reality, I joke, but it is serious stuff. There's some safety issues with this. And we've had some issues, even just right here close. Several years ago, we had an issue where this was happening right here in Provo, right down here on the corner, just a couple blocks away. Wouldn't apply because the miles per hour isn't high enough. But a serious situation where protesters were blocking a road, a driver tried to get away, a shot was fired, and some things happened, right? And so these can be very serious. I don't mean to minimize that. But because of some of the pushback that got, the road became very, very defined, and it's pretty limited, so we're probably not going to see this a ton. But if you do, we're not taking it anymore, Misty, all right? Down in Juab County, this doesn't fly. Okay?
There's no way that the speed limit is high enough in Juab County for this.
The freeway.
Oh, okay.
We got to the interstate.
House Bill 87.
Yeah. Ron's back there getting down a little bit to Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Calm down, Ron.
Come
Sit
on,
down.
Ron, settle down. Okay. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s like I did, and listened to rap music like I did, I grew up in Ogden. I'm a child of Ogden in the 80s and 90s. I'm a gangster rapper.
Practically invented rap music
practically
there.
invented gangster rap, right? Then you, like me, listened to Bone Thugs and Harmony. You understood about one of every 11 words that they said, and we would say that 11th word every time, and maybe get 3 in a row, right? That was about as good as we could do. If you ever go back and pull up the lyrics in 2025 to this song, you'll realize that it's all about going and cashing your check at the first month to buy drugs and partying. Okay? So the legislature has created a new offense for drug trafficking of fentanyl. And they have created a new trafficking amount of fentanyl, which is 100 grams. Now, I don't know what 100 grams of fentanyl looks like, but I found a picture on the internet of what 35.3 grams of fentanyl looks like. So just do that 3 times. There you go. It's 1,000 pills. See, I should just call you Kelsey. Kelsey, tell me what this is, right? Very, very experienced in the drug prosecution world. So, 100 grams of fentanyl is now officially under statute a trafficking amount of fentanyl. And if you possess it with the intent to distribute, it is now a first-degree felony in the state of Utah to do so. Prison is mandatory in these cases, unless it's not. Okay? We've learned through experience, Trent and I, as we go around and do these, that there's a lot of things that are mandatory, unless it isn't.
Unless it's not.
And this is one of them. But the judge has to make certain findings on the record and has to put them on AP&P probation. So if you get a trafficking fentanyl case, 100 grams of fentanyl or more, then it is a first-degree felony. Kelsey, How often are we going to see this?
Quite frequently. I mean, today, right now, I have a case of 40,000 bills.
Yep.
And that's about 400. I mean, that's really difficult. So yeah, that's, I mean, 1,000 bills is not that much. In all honesty, the U.S. attorneys are turning down like 2,500 to 3,000 bills.
Yep.
So I need to, but this is also based somewhat, that 1,000 bill or 100 gram threshold is somewhat based off of some of the guidelines that the feds use. But I think this is going to be a very frequently seen statute, which will be interesting to see how often prison is actually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as a Sal said, I plan on using this for the cases where the feds are rejecting them. I really want to put this into practice and see how the courts are doing it.
Well, prison is actually mandatory,
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
unless it's not.
Unless it's not.
It's not, but that's what I'm saying, but how many people find that as a possible? Because
Yep.
usually we're arguing the other way around from a presumptive probation.
Yep, exactly. It's huge in our area. This is a big thing. And for those who couldn't hear, and for those online, Kelsey, I asked her, because she does a lot of drug prosecution. That's what she does. And so that's why I went to her. In some of the discussions on this bill, the people that are really in the know on drug investigations, you know, some of our narcotics task force and things, said that this 100-gram threshold is going to get met every single day across the state. This is not going to be something that we see infrequently in the state. And so this is something, it's heavy-handed, but the legislature is saying, I could have used we're not going to take it from Twisted Sister on this one too, but they're trying to do something about fentanyl and the distribution of fentanyl in our state. And this was their answer. We're going to make it a first-degree felony if for the distributors, and we're going to send them to prison. And so we'll see how it goes. I'm with you, but this is going to happen. If you think this isn't going to happen very often because 100 grams is a lot, it's really not. And it's going to be happening in all of our communities around Utah every single day.
It's time to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to our music trivia. Who sings that?
You knew.
Who thinks Backstreet Boys? Who thinks NSYNC? Who thought they were too manly to raise their hand? Paul Fuller. NSYNC. So there was some creditor lobbyists that are like, we want people prosecuted when they're hiding their crap from us. And they got this pass, defrauding creditors. They added a new way to prove that. If we can show someone intentionally or knowingly deprived the secured party of lawful possession, if the value or the amount owed, the amount owed was over 10 grand, it's now a third-degree felony. It used to just be an MA. Now we've got an F3 if the value is over 10 grand. The idea of this was to incentivize police and prosecutors who they said previously were just like, it's just an MA, why do we care? But now we've got an F3 to get these people. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. If you're going to talk about high school students having sex with their teacher, there's really only one song that's appropriate to have as a walk-up song. And it's Hot for Teacher, right? And you might be asking, what does it have to do with the Harlem Globetrotters pantsing somebody? Well, I'm about to tell you. Okay? There is a new offense, third-degree felony offense, sexual relations with an adult high school student. Okay? So we have always had these offenses for minors, right? And if somebody in a special position of trust at the school was having sex with a high school student that was a minor, we've had offenses for that. We now have one for even those high school students that are adults, okay? But it requires that the person be 21 years or older, that they occupy a position of special trust, so like an administrator, a coach, a teacher, school counselor, all these would fit for that, and that they engage in sexual intercourse or other sexual type of activity with an adult high school student, even if it is consensual. So consensual sex amongst two adults could be a third-degree felony if there is that position of special trust with the adult being over the age of 21, okay? Remember last year, the definition of sexual intercourse changed?
Yes.
Or I thought it was last year because I thought you talked about it. It changed to actually broaden that statute a little bit, make it more clear of what counts as sexual intercourse. But there are other actions that don't fit the sexual intercourse definition that would still fit this statute, all right? Now, what does that have to do with the Harlem Globetrotters pantsing somebody in the middle of the game? Well, there's an indecent exposure of another statute that was passed this legislative session as well, okay? So if somebody, in a non-consensual way, pantses another in public and exposes their underwear, this is a Class C misdemeanor. Okay? So you walk up behind your buddy in the office. In the office? Yeah, I know what's happening down there in Utah County, McKay. Okay? All right? Jeff, I was meaning to talk to you about this, but I was going to do it privately, but I guess McKay outed himself. So, with these things, Class C misdemeanor for non-consensual pantsing where the underwear is exposed. If genitalia or any other body part is exposed, it enhances that to a Class B misdemeanor. All right? Also, it becomes a Class A if that's done in the presence of somebody under the age of 14. So if this goes a little bit wrong, and Curly on the Harlem Globetrotters gets the underwear as well, and there's somebody under the age of 14 in the stands there at the Delta Center here when the Harlem Globetrotters come to town, Class A misdemeanor. And then there's this other random part of this where it just increases the penalty for attempted murder from 3 to life to 5 to life. So when we're talking about sex with adults in high schools, in pantsing, and then attempted murder is just 5 to life instead of 3 to life. So there you have it.
I think, Josh Coe, just so you know, statute of limitations is not going to go back to 1997. So your Copper Hills, juvenile jinx, you're fine, buddy. It's okay.
Copper Hills, wow. All right.
If I'm completely honest, this is going to be my favorite bill that was passed this last legislative session. Song, artist, hopefully are obvious. Elton John, Candle in the Wind. So this is a picture of Ashley V. Hill. This case means a lot to me for a lot of reasons. One of them, I actually handled this case for a period of time. So Ashley was bedridden, unable to communicate. Her mother married a man who moved into the house. Her mom noticed that Ashley started having an increased amount of seizures. So she started talking to the doctor about this, wondering what's happening, trying to figure out what the source of that was. And the doctor encouraged her to put a camera in the room where Ashley was staying so they could try and figure out what the cause of it was. Well, this man who had moved into the house, who had married Ashley's mom, was raping Ashley while mom was gone. And now we had a slew of first-degree felony counts against him, but 5 to life, y'all just heard those facts. That's not enough. Thankfully, there's a lot of people that joined in on this, but I know Salt Lake County, Brett Robinson took up the banner for this to make Ashley's bill and Ashley's law. So now if we have an incapacitated individual who is a victim of sexual offenses, the default sentence is 10 years instead of 5. To be incapacitated, you got to be 14 or older, have an intellectual, physical, neurological, or cognitive disease or defect, and have 2 of the following 3. So you can't appraise the nature of a sexual act, can't resist or escape, or you can't report. Really, really good law that was passed. As a father of a son who will likely fall into this, oh my gosh. Seriously, thank you to those of you who got this done. This means a lot. This is a big deal.
Armed and extremely dangerous. House Bill 128 is the recodification of the dangerous weapons statutes. But as things aren't always what they seem, there are some new offenses that came in on this as well when we do this. So all of your firearms laws are recodified to 53-5A and then 76-11. So anything that was in 7610.5 is all out of there now. It's in 7611. And then a lot of your definitions and other things are in 53.5A. So if you're looking for your dangerous weapons stuff, you don't know where it went, it's recodified, it's there. But let's talk about some of the new offenses that were in this bill as well. Second-degree felony for concealing a short-barreled rifle or shotgun. Okay, that's a new offense. Carrying a dangerous weapon at an institution of higher education is a new offense that's in there. It's a Class B misdemeanor if it's a non-firearm dangerous weapon. It's a Class A misdemeanor if it is a firearm. Now, there are exceptions for people who are lawfully able to carry a dangerous weapon, right? Concealed weapon licenses, other things. If you're lawfully carrying your dangerous weapon, then there are some exceptions there. Carrying a dangerous weapon at a daycare is now an offense on the statute. Again, a Class B misdemeanor if it's a non-firearm. If it's a firearm, it becomes a Class A misdemeanor. Prohibited conduct in the sale of a dangerous weapon. So if you're trying to sell and you know you're misrepresenting your lawful status or another person's lawful status, that's illegal as well. One thing that I think we will see in your everyday practice, even in justice courts, especially in justice courts, is the charge of possession of a dangerous weapon under the influence has had those 4 sections in it that said that this is not a violation of the law, right? Does everybody remember those? One of them is if the firearm was securely encased. It made it so that that was not actually against the law to possess a dangerous weapon under the influence. That securely encased language has been removed. That is no longer in the defenses, or it's not even really, I guess it is a defense, to the offense. But they've made it that it requires that the firearm or the dangerous weapon be readily accessible for immediate use while under the influence. So they didn't just get rid of it entirely, but having it securely encased is no longer exempts that from the statute, okay, from that statute. But if it is securely encased, you're going to have to be able to prove that it was immediately available, readily available for immediate use. And if it's securely encased, then it probably isn't readily available for that. Also, carrying a loaded firearm on a public street by an 18 to 20-year-old is a Class B misdemeanor. So if you have your 18-year-olds running up and down the street with a loaded firearm, and loaded is defined in the statute. There's a definition for that in the statute. It doesn't just mean that there was bullets in a magazine. But if that is met, that's a new Class B misdemeanor.
Sung by the Proclaimers. The song's called I'm Gonna Be. The amount of miles he was willing to walk. And another 500. Well, thanks to the efforts of Carl Holland and Representative Wilcox, if you travel just 45 miles to commit a child sex offense, that is an aggravating factor. So if you yourself travel 45 miles or more from a primary residence to another location to commit a child sex offense, aggravating factor. If you pay for the child to travel 45 miles or more in order to commit a child sex offense, aggravating factor. This was primarily brought about to target out-of-staters who came here. There were a lot of offenses from Canadian truck drivers who were coming down to Utah, wanted to criminalize that. And I know what you're all thinking. Well, where did the 45 miles come from, Trent? And I wondered the same thing. Was sitting in the hearing and was thinking this, as Representative Wilcox said, I bet y'all are wondering what this 45 miles thing is. It's just a number we picked. And so, of course, Conspiracy Trent was wondering where 45 miles came from. Do you want to talk to Conspiracy Trent for a second, Tyson?
I do. I love Conspiracy Trent. He's my favorite.
Salt Lake City Center to Provo City Center, 44.5 miles.
You BYU fans, stay away, all right? Or we're hitting you with aggravating factors.
House Bill 159. War, sung by, dang, are you Shazamming? House Bill 159, after we called out the Canadian truck drivers, we were like, whoa, we better step back. We don't want to start crap with Canada. Who would do that? So we came back with House Bill 159 and said, you know what, Canada? We're going to honor your protective orders now. So in case you see a protective order from Canada, Utah law now allows us to enforce that.
As we go through this, I learned a lot about AI and what it's capable and able to do, and it's pretty amazing. But when you plug in AI that I need a picture of a motorcycle doing a wheelie while lane splitting without a license plate, it's nearly perfect, but it still gives you the dang license plate, so I had to black it out. But it still works. And if you are a motorcycle rider on the steel horse that you ride, there are now requirements of how and where you have to display your license plate. I really should be on this side of the room for this conversation. Yeah, I'm coming to you, Kennard. Yeah, okay. You have requirements of where you need to put your license plate on and display it on the motorcycle. If you don't, you can get a ticket for that, obviously, and it will come with a 90-day suspension of your motorcycle endorsement for a first offense, a 180-day suspension for a second offense, and a permanent revocation for a third offense. And now let's talk about wheelies, Randy, because I've seen you riding up and down the street, popping that wheelie up and down, right? Yeah, maybe I'm lying a little bit, but I've seen him. We'll go with that. If you pop a wheelie while riding a motorcycle on a highway, that is now prohibited conduct. You can get a ticket for that. Same suspensions. 90 days of your motorcycle endorsement for a first offense, 180 days for a second offense, permanent revocation for a third offense. Now, if you're riding down the highway and you're lane splitting, which on my way home from work, I saw 2 different motorcycles doing that very thing on I-15. That is the same thing. 90-day, whoa, that was you. 90 days for a first offense, 180 days, permanent revocation for a third offense. Here's the kicker. For all 3 of these offenses, statute now authorizes law enforcement to impound the motorcycle at that time. And I can promise you that as I go around the state and train 29 counties worth of law enforcement, I'm going to be telling them to impound the motorcycle 100% of the time on these offenses, especially the lane splitting. Because nothing pisses me off worse than when I'm driving on I-15 or not driving on I-15 and motorcycles go whizzing up the lane because it's illegal. This isn't California. We don't allow that crap here. Okay? It's dangerous, and we need to stop that. So just be aware, we're really hitting wheeling, non-license plated, lane splitting motorcycle drivers. All right? We're not going to take it anymore.
God dang, no fun Tyson.
No fun Tyson.
House Bill 195. Janie's Got a Gun by Aerosmith. Do any of y'all know why Janie's got a gun? Because y'all gave her a plea in abeyance. That's what this law is about. If you give someone a plea in abeyance on an offense that they wouldn't otherwise be restricted, you cannot keep the firearm as a condition of their probation. Ryan Robinson and others put in a ton of work to try and get certain offenses exempted, like in a case where you're brandishing a gun during a DV, but could not. This somehow became a Second Amendment issue. But if you want to keep someone's gun during their probation, do not give them a plea in abeyance, unless it's something they would be restricted anyway. House Bill 197. That song is Hit the Road Jack, sung by Ray Charles. There was a phrase that, Carl, I'm going to give you credit for, that we tried to spread throughout the legislative session, that Utah was becoming the sex offender sanctuary state. And we did not want that. So a couple years ago, had a statute passed that allowed sex offenders to go to Utah courts to get taken off the registry if they were put on by a different state. And this bill peeled that back in a really, really good way. So if you have that person who moved in from out of state, they got registered there, they have to go back to the jurisdiction where they were convicted of the offense that required them to register and have a judge authorize them to be removed from the registry, and then bring that back to Utah judge and say, okay, my home judge where I committed the offense said that I can be taken off, now you can take me off, which hopefully prevents Utah becoming the sex offender sanctuary state. Yes?
So we have 4 registries. Does this apply to all 4 or just the one?
That's a good question. Carl, do you know the answer to that?
What do you mean by 4 registries?
Well, there's a child.
Kidnap, child, sex. Does it apply to all 3? Regardless of if they are registered out of state, they're still going to have to go out of state if it's any of those. Other things this does. So it amends the crime of enticing a minor to make it clear that if you're communicating with an adult in order to entice the minor, that still qualifies. It also gives guidance to judges who are deciding whether or not to remove somebody from the registry who was 18 to 21 they committed the offense. It gives us some factors to consider in determining whether or not force or coercion was used.
This is one of them, right? Last Dance with Mary Jane, Tom Petty. Who knows what this picture's from? Raise your hand if you think you know. Huh? Which house in Breaking Bad? Jesse's house, right? That he put the meth lab in, and then when his parents tried to sell it, he used that to his advantage to get it for cheaper, and it became his house, right? Okay, well done, Robert. Well done, I like it. The Breaking Bad house in New Mexico, which actually really exists, apparently. I found it on Google Maps, Street View, so it's there. So House Bill 199, Substance Use Treatment and Enforcement Amendments. This creates a new second-degree felony for those who maintain a drug-involved premises. Okay, so if somebody knowingly or intentionally allows a property to be used for the unlawful manufacture, distribution, or use of controlled substances, that's a second-degree felony. All right? There's also some other provisions in here on what judges can do if nuisance laws are utilized. If it's a nuisance situation because of the drug house and they don't abate it, judges can charge them up to a $50 per day penalty for failing to abate that nuisance. There's a whole lot more in this bill that I'm not going to talk about, but if you advise a county health department or other people on some of these things that go on with that, you're going to want to take a look at this bill. because there's quite a bit on substance abuse treatment, the county health departments, other things that go into there, but that's on the civil side. So they'll either handle that tomorrow or you're on your own. I'm not going to talk about that here in the criminal update.
House Bill 287. Shockingly, that song is called Work, sung by Rihanna. So, as is often the case with statute amendments, new statutes, there was one constituent who raised hell about something that happened to them. If you have a stalking case and someone is engaging in a course of conduct that's reasonable and necessarily related to work and not directed at their cohabitant, that's not stalking. I think this was pretty common sense as it was, but apparently there was one case at one point where this became an issue. Just know you may have to overcome that if you have a stalking case and they're trying to claim it was related to work. Work, 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 work.
See, we got a few people in here who know this, right? If I raise a hand, who are my bikers in here who like to ride road bike? Ride their road bicycles. Okay? Ed Montgomery, how do you feel when you're coming down a bike lane and there's cars parked in it?
Scared.
Scared? Is that the only feeling you feel?
Well, I wish they would park there. Yeah.
That's a very nice way of saying middle finger F you, right, Ed? I know you better than this. Don't BS me, okay?
Well, not everyone's trying to tow every motorcycle, Tyson.
That's true, but I am. And I want people to get out of Ed's bike lanes too. So another interesting thing about AI, you go into AI and you say, I need a picture of a road in Utah with a bike lane in it. This is what it gives you. So if you want to go down to the Forrest Gump road, the shot that Forrest Gump made famous to the whole world that true Utahns knew existed all along, right? Am I right? Anybody in here with me? Okay, maybe not. Maybe there's a bike lane there now. And if there is, it's going to be illegal for you to park in it or drive in it, except for under certain circumstances. Okay? So, can't drive your vehicle in a bike lane except for obviously like if you're turning and you have to go across one or getting over for an emergency vehicle. There's some exceptions there. But you can't park in a bike lane anywhere in the state of Utah anymore. It used to kind of be that municipalities, it was up to them to put like a no parking bike lane sign up and make that illegal. Those signs don't have to be up anymore. If it's a bike lane, you just can't park there anymore.
House Bill 297. Who here deals with a lot of expungements? Anybody? Just skip right past this. Who sings that? The Lovin' Spoonful. Oh my gosh. Lunch on Tyson.
Everybody's welcome. Tomorrow, I will provide lunch for all of you for being such good participants here today.
So this deals with expungement. First and foremost, Tyson, this removes DUI as codified before February 2nd, 2005 from the list of automatically expungible offenses.
Heck yeah.
Did you throw a party about that?
I'm throwing a party right now.
It also, as important to me, if somebody has an active civil protective order, they cannot get an expungement for that offense. Additionally, if someone's applying for a civil protective order or a stalking injunction, the judge can consider offenses that have been expunged. So keep that in mind. Important to try and protect people who deserve protection.
Chad.
Do you expect DCI to catch that?
The question for those online was, do you expect
Do I
DCI?
expect them to catch that? No. But good question.
We hope. There's always a hope and a prayer, right? See, Chad, that's why I love you. It's just eternal, hope springs eternal in your world. Parent or legal guardian of a permitted driver as they're learning how to drive before they get their driver license. Then you understand the highway to hell that I'm talking about right now. All right? This is actually my now 18-year-old daughter who has had her license for a couple years now, but I'm currently in my second phase of highway to hell with my now 15-year-old daughter who's way worse than this one at driving. She sucks. Okay?
She's not online watching.
She might be. They wanted to see the walk-up music. So they might be watching. Kinley, if you're watching, I love you. You suck. Okay? She's terrible. She needs lots of practice. And that's why this program's so good, right? Gives kids a chance to do this. So what does this bill do? This really isn't super important for what we're talking about as prosecutors. You may see this every once in a while. You're probably not going to see it all that often if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But it does expand who can be that supervising adult for a 15 or 16, 17-year-old who has a learner permit learning how to drive. But it requires the following: that the parent or legal guardian of the child who is driving is not a licensed driver. Okay, so if mom or dad have a license, it's going to have to be mom or dad or another legal guardian. Okay? The individual who is the supervising adult has to have in their immediate possession proof that parent or legal guardian has signed off on them supervising the driving, and then they also have to be a licensed driver. The reason why I actually included this wasn't for that. It was because I'm going to give you a pitch for something different. Because guess what? When Bob puts me and Trent in charge, we decide what we want to talk about. We'll talk about whatever we want to talk about. So here's my pitch. 2 years in a row, we've had legislators try to attack the graduated driver license laws in Utah. This was another one. They were going to allow another juvenile passenger that's not a family member to be in the car when a person is driving in their first 6 months of driving. So if a 16, 17, or 17-year-old gets a driver license for the first 6 months, they're not allowed to have any non-family passengers in the car. This was going to make one passenger. They scrapped that. Last year they were going to just get rid of that in general. There's a lot of buzzwords in our world, in the legislative world, like evidence-based. Does that make anybody else's skin crawl when you hear somebody say, well, is that evidence-based? Because I don't think they actually know what that means. But if there's anything in our world that is evidence-based, the graduated driver license is one of them. And I think we care about public safety, right? I think we do. We pretend to, at least. And even if we pretend to, then something that saves lives the way that the graduated driver license is probably something we ought to fight for. So as this continues to be battled over year, I know it's just a learner permit or it's just a graduated driver license and we don't care. But this is something that has significantly reduced crash risk for teenagers and teenage drivers. And so if you have one and you're not enforcing it, start enforcing it. If it comes up to fight it, let's stand up for public safety and for our kids. Break time. We're ending our break a little bit early from the clock, but we're going to take about 10 minutes here. So come back in about 10 minutes and we'll get started on the second half. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I always say when I go around and I train law enforcement and we go to break and everybody's still kind of chatting, I say the earlier we get started, the earlier we can get finished. And the only thing standing between you and the road and your wheelies and lane splitting on your motorcycle is me and Trent. All right? So we're going to go ahead and get started here. All right. So let's talk about bad habits and overcrowding jails. House Bill 312, this is one that actually has a delayed implementation date. And depending on which part of the bill we're talking about, we're having different implementation dates. It's either July 1st of this year or September 1st of this year. Okay? Most of the stuff that apply to the jails start on July 1st. Everything else is going to be September 1st. The real thing for prosecutors on this is the definition of habitual offender has changed in the state of Utah. And people's bad habits are now going to get them in a little bit more trouble maybe when we go about this. So if you have 9 felony charges or 5 felony convictions in the last 5 years, and this is evidence-based, okay? These numbers, when we talk about evidence-based, this is evidence-based stuff. 9 felony charges or 5 felony convictions in the last 5 years, you are now a habitual offender in the state of Utah.
They're cracking down, right? Before it was 6.
Yeah.
5.
Yep. So big changes there. The thing that is a really big change on this, however, is if you have 9 misdemeanor convictions or 19 misdemeanor charges in the previous 5 years, you are now a habitual offender in the state of Utah. And there are some implications for that. And so we didn't used to see these in the justice courts, right? You might see a habitual offender in the district court with some of these offenses, but you will now start seeing people who are habitual offenders in the justice courts. If you have somebody who is a habitual offender, you have to notify the judge, and they have to order a pre-sentence investigation report. It's a must, it's a shall, unless they don't. Right? Like everything else when they do it. So it's mandatory unless it's not. But you have to do that at the time of conviction, at the entrance of plea or conviction if you go to trial. Let the judge know that this person is going to be a habitual offender, and then they have to order a pre-sentence report in regards to that. Okay? There are a ton of provisions in 312 on jails and overcrowding. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about overcrowding here and the contracting that they have to do with other counties if you're going to be housing other offenders for other counties. But if you're advising your jails on that, you're going to want to pay attention to this. But I will tell you when people cannot be released due to overcrowding circumstances. Now, they might get released for another reason, but for jails that are letting people out for overcrowding purposes, they can no longer do it under these circumstances. Okay? If the offender has been previously booked in the same jail within the last 12-month period. So if this is their second time going back to the same jail, not just any jail, but the same jail, then that sheriff may not release that person for overcrowding. If they've been arrested or convicted of any of the following: a violent offense, a felony drug offense, the new fentanyl over 100 grams offense, DUI or driving with a measurable controlled substance that resulted in death or serious bodily injury, or if they have a warrant for failing to appear on any of those offenses. Okay, they can't be released for overcrowding. And then offenders that are ineligible for OR releases are those with a violent offense. It used to only be a violent felony offense, but even if it's a violent misdemeanor, they can't be OR released anymore. Possess 100 grams of fentanyl or were previously booked in the same jail with the last 12 months. So this is a huge bill. Again, this is another one that has a ton of stuff. Most of it is involved with jails and their contracting and other things. And so again, some of you in county attorney's offices may need to know about this, but it's not specific to criminals, so we're just not going to dive too deep into that. The last thing that this does, a little bit of an oddball provision when we're talking about what we're talking about here, but a very important provision, is it adds strangulation as an offense of domestic violence in the presence of a child. So that used to not qualify as an offense for domestic violence in the presence of a child, at least not specifically articulated in the statute, and now it is. Well done, Trent.
Fixing an oversight. Is there a better walk-up song for the legislature and their data?
No, there is not. House Bill 354 is a data bill, okay? And this is another one that started out pretty broad, right, Megan? This was a ton, and it still has a ton of stuff in it, and we're going to talk about this, but it was whittled down a little bit. So with this bill, House Bill 354, Trent and I are going to actually tag team this one. We're splitting it up because there's a lot to talk about here. But in my portion, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. So let's do the good news first, Tim? All right. Well, last year, you guys might remember that a very first bill that we talked about in the legislative session, which I expect you all to remember, the order of what we talked about and who it was, right? I stood up and I told you about a bill that the legislature passed that required counties of the first class, and it's funny that they say counties of the first class since we have exactly one, right? And some reporting and time monitoring requirements that county would have in their prosecutor's offices, their county attorney's office, right? That Salt Lake County was going to have to monitor their prosecution cases every 15 minutes, logging every 15 minutes how much they worked on these cases, right? Everybody remember that? And you all may have thought, well, that's Salt Lake County, I don't care. But if you have that thought, it's because you didn't listen to me. Because last year I stood here and I said, we should care about this, even if we don't work for Salt Lake County. And there's multiple reasons. One, it's just wrong that they're making them do this, and we ought to care about right and wrong. And two, they're coming after you next. Okay? So the good news is, we got rid of the 15-minute logging requirement. That no longer exists in statute, okay? So even counties of the first class are no longer going to have to monitor their time in 15-minute increments and report that to the legislature. The bad news is all of these reporting requirements that the counties of the first class had to do last year, now counties of the second and third class have to do. Raise your hand if you work for a county that is a county of the first, second, or third class. Raise them high. Come on, get them up there. All right? That's a pretty significant number. And I'm glad to see Chad Dotson raise his hand there because he is a county of the third class. You wouldn't think Iron County has that many residents, but they do. Okay, just barely. They barely meet it. So they are Salt Lake, Weber, Davis, Utah, Washington, Box Elder, Cache, Tooele, Summit, Uinta, and Iron. Those are our counties of first, second, and third class. And if you work in a prosecutor's office, you now have all those same reporting requirements that the counties of the first class got last year and more. Okay? So let's talk about what has to be reported. The average amount of taxpayer dollars spent per case, as calculated by the total number of misdemeanors, juvenile adjudications, and felonies, divided by the portion of the attorney's annual budget allocated per prosecution. So basically what you got to do is you got to take all of your cases, juvenile, misdemeanor, felony, and whatever your prosecution budget is, you divide that and how much money are we spending in taxpayer dollars per case. And you're going to have to report that to the legislature. Okay, the legislature is really interested to find out how much it's costing to prosecute people in the state of Utah per case.
Can we compare that to the cost of living?
You can do whatever you want. You have my blessing.
Can we ask the legislature?
Well, you can ask the legislature, yes. They might say no. You can ask the legislature if you want. Tim?
Does it include screening cases or cases that are actually filed?
Screening cases, I think, would apply. Yeah. Because that's part of the deal, right? Even if you decline a case, that's still a case that came through. So I would think that would count. Maybe people who were more involved in that discussion. Jeff?
The language is a little ambiguous.
Very.
So we'll see what they get.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to get really good data.
Yeah.
Certainly.
We'll have about 26 different interpretations of the data.
We will.
It's like great data, right?
And I have a little bit of maybe something that we're going to talk about a little bit later on this, on data. But here's another thing you have to report. The total number of juvenile adjudications, misdemeanors, and felonies. Okay, we already have that because we're going to divide it by your budget. So that will be reported as well. The total case numbers by individual prosecutor average annual caseload of felonies broken down by the following: sex offenses, general crimes, and crimes of violence. So you're going to have to start dealing out different types of cases and what a prosecutor's caseload is in each one of these. And this is really important data because we fully expect that the legislature, when they see that all of you have too many cases, they're going to throw all sorts of money at this so we can hire people, right, Jeff? I mean,
raises?
this is really important for the legislature to know because they're going to help us solve these problems. Here's also what you need to do. Total number of cases categorized by the most serious charge as follows. And some of this, you guys, is actually already in statute. We have already had a data bill that we were supposed to be reporting for the last 3 years, 4 years maybe, to the legislature on these things. The number of cases declined due to insufficient evidence, cases dismissed after charges were filed, cases where plea agreement reached before preliminary hearing, cases dismissed by the court after preliminary hearing, cases where a plea agreement was reached after preliminary hearing, so we're getting dispositions before prelim, after prelim, cases that resulted in a conviction at trial, cases that resulted in an acquittal at trial. Average number of days, and this is a good one too, average number of days between the filing of criminal charges. Oh boy, Bob's not even in the room. The alarm's going off. Will you just unplug that? Oh, never mind. Thank you. So the average number of days between the filing of criminal charges and the delivery of discovery information, including witness statements. So you're going to have to start tracking how long before you file the charge and how many days between giving discovery and the first day of trial. Okay? Some of these that we just talked about apply to every single prosecution agency in the room. That last little bit that we just talked about, the total number of cases do this. It says any prosecution agency in the state has to report those. If you are on UPC's e-prosecutor program, Ron has worked with your groups a lot and with e-prosecutor to get as much of this in that's already been required. And with the new statute, he's going to work to get everything in that's required. And that will be automatically reported. If you're not on e-prosecutor with Utah, with UPC, you better work with whoever it is that's doing your case management to make sure all this is there and then report that. There is no penalty, right? I don't know what the penalty is other than the legislature next year says, we're really mad at you guys for not doing what we told you to do, so we're going to pass other laws like a 15-minute reporting requirement, right? So, for now, right? For now. There's no penalty. They could conceivably put in penalties, right? They have a carrot and a stick, and they don't always use the carrot with us, it seems. So just be aware of this. There's data reporting that has to be a part of this with 354, a lot of data reporting. It is going to require you to do more work, and your assistants especially, to do more work, but that's what the legislature said.
And that's a lot.
It's a lot.
But they want it all.
They want it all.
So that's not all of it. When this came out, not only was it broad, it was a disaster. They wanted all prosecution agencies to report all of the false accusations on sex assaults. And those of us in that world rallied the troops and went down to the Capitol and created a giant line. UCASA, Victim Services Commission, AG's office, myself. Jeff Gray wasn't even there to talk about this, and he was like, oh no, we're not going to do that. Giant line to talk about how dumb that is. Just in case you were wondering what I thought about that. So, thankfully the language was changed, but all prosecution agencies do have to report false report charges on any misdemeanor or felony and the disposition of that, as well as the number of felonies and misdemeanors dismissed or declined because there's evidence no crime was committed, insufficient evidence for likelihood of reasonable success at trial, or the victim's unable to participate. So we got to a more reasonable place with that. We jumped from 1987 to like 2004. But we're still going to have to report those things. That goes into effect January 1. So we've got some time to digest, simmer, before y'all have to report that. House Bill 358. Say, Drake.
You tired? They not like us.
Look at this guy. Oh.
That song is Not Like Us by... So of course, we're talking about protecting minors. And Utah wants to be a pioneer in this field, so we now have a law, or actually two of them, protecting minors and children from unlawful sexual activity using virtual reality. So if somebody, the actor, uses an avatar to intentionally engage in sexual activity or simulated sexual activity with the child or minor's avatar, and they know that's a child or minor, that's an offense, but that's not it. Who here plays Call of Duty? There's got to be some.
Nobody? I don't buy that.
I saw like a couple of these.
Jared, he's brave.
Okay,
There we go.
you Call of Duty players, you're welcome. We sat around for weeks talking about how are we going to protect Call of Duty players who teabag each other after killing each other in the game. I'm not kidding. So we added an intent element. So there has to be with the intent to arouse or gratify. And if you're doing that in Call of Duty, we're still going to come get you. Better not have some intent to arouse or gratify while you're teabagging the dude you just shot. But if you have a case like this is the first statute in the country for virtual sexual assault. This bill also criminalizes custodial solicitation of sexually explicit conduct from a person in custody. So if we have officers, correctional workers who are doing anything like that, that's now an offense as well. Every time I train in the academy, I'm now bringing this up and asking them, who here thinks this is a problem, that we shouldn't have passed this law? I'm trying to weed those suckers out. But no, that's also an offense now. May 7, 2025.
Still a family channel, guys. We're going to stop right there, all right? This one's pretty simple. A lot of judges were doing this already, but it's now actually lawful under the statute for them to do it. If somebody is in court-ordered treatment, they can now take the fines or the money they're paying for that court-ordered treatment and put it towards their fines. So again, a lot of judges are already doing that. It's now lawful, so don't worry, nobody's going to come and give you crap over that anymore.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
Does that apply to statutorily mandated fines like DUIs also?
Probably. I'm going to say probably. I'm not going to give you a definitive answer on that one because I don't know. But I think it counts for any fine. It does not count for restitution. They can't avail themselves of this in restitution. But I think it would apply for any fine. But we may need to look at that closer. Christianelli over there, he starts jamming as soon as this song
I
comes
saw that.
on.
I saw that.
He is in. I always have to give Chris a hard time during the legislative update. He's my friend, so he forgives me for those things. House Bill 401 did not pass, okay? This is not a bill that passed the legislature this year. So you're asking yourself, why are we talking about it, Tyson? And the answer is because I promised Representative Jack I would. And so that's why I'm here to talk about House Bill 401. Representative Jack ran this bill, and he came to SWAP-LAC meeting, and wanted our feedback. And he got a lot of prosecutor feedback on this, that maybe it wasn't necessary, and other things he said. So what can we do to get the message out? And I said, well, I happen to know a guy who does some training on legislative issues and has a big conference coming up, and is then going to go around the entire state and train hundreds and hundreds of police officers on this. And he said, well, that would be great. And somebody who will remain nameless, but his name rhymes with Dan Burton, said, I'm going to talk to Bob Church. And I go, Dan, I'm the one that does the training. You don't need to talk to Bob Church. I'm right here.
Who's more important?
Trent is more important, is the answer to that. So let's talk about this. I put Sabrina Carpenter, right? That's who this is. I didn't know who Sabrina Carpenter was until this bill started getting talked about. And another prosecutor will remain nameless, but his name rhymes with Ryan Robinson, continues to bring up Sabrina Carpenter every single time. So I had to go do some research on Sabrina Carpenter. Apparently, she's a little bit controversial at her concerts and other things that go on. And so I put up a couple images of maybe some of her more controversial moments recently at her concerts, and for the question of, would this be illegal as a sexual performance in the state of Utah? And if it was, do you got the guts to go and arrest Sabrina Carpenter and charge her here with these things at this? So the idea is that we would talk about what laws are already in place. We already have a lot of laws. And what we need to do is we need to make sure we realize what we did just last year. In last year's legislative session, they passed a law on, what are we talking about? Trent, lewdness involving a child. I couldn't find it on my thing. Trent worked on this bill a lot last year, and others did as well. But they passed a law of lewdness involving a child, which, if intentionally or knowingly, and with specific intent of causing affront and alarm to a child, or with intent to arouse or gratify sexual desire of the child, there's simulated masturbation, simulating intercourse or sodomy, displaying male genitals in a turgid state, erotic touching of the actor's breasts, or involving the child in an act of simulated masturbation, intercourse, or sodomy. Okay? This is a law we just passed last year. Some of these situations would apply, right? Other laws that we have, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we have other laws, lewdness. Okay? We have lewdness involving a child that we just talked about. Pornographic materials or performances. And that's one that was actually just recodified. It's an old law, but it's got a new number in 76.5C. Dealing in harmful material to minors. Okay, would any of these things start to apply? There is going to be, at CCJJ, there's a subcommittee that's going to be looking at this to see if these laws can maybe be combined into one or how they are, and as we move forward. But Representative Jack, basically, he was told, we don't need this. And he said, so what do I do when I keep getting calls from Vernal, in St. George, in Logan, in Salt Lake City, that I need to do something about this? I looked at him and I said, call the police. If you think a crime was committed, call your county or city attorney, talk to them. They don't need to be calling their legislator because we have enough bills on the books that can handle this anyways. So I fulfilled my promise to Representative Jack. Eric, will you please report that I did my duty, and I will continue to do so as we go around to the police officers. But we have plenty of bills on that can take care of these types of situations. We just need to use them.
House Bill 405.
The back.
That is sung by Drake. And those of you in the know, I'm sure are like, wait a minute, Trent. How can you play Kendrick and Drake back to back? And it's because we're talking once again about protection of children and minors. So this was actually...
He get himself sued.
I know. This was actually a good presentation with some good research behind it. So we had a handful of people looking at our human trafficking statutes and the associated penalties, and they went and compared them to other states like Georgia, Oklahoma, and New Jersey, and pointed out, God, the penalties for human trafficking in those states are substantially higher than they are here in Utah, so we need to raise them, and they did. So if you have human trafficking of a child, that's going to be a first-degree felony with a 15 to life sentence now. If you have human trafficking of a vulnerable adult, aggravated human trafficking, or benefiting from trafficking and human smuggling, now 10 to life. So a handful of offenses, we got pretty good bump in sentencing to keep your eye out for if you handle these types of cases.
So we didn't start the fire here in Utah, but we're sure gonna fight it. Do you guys know that last year the legislature made it illegal for prohibited, restricted foreign entities to purchase land and own land in the state of Utah? Those restricted foreign entities are Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. Those are listed in statute as those entities are prohibited from owning land in the state of Utah. They can't purchase it, they can't own it. And if they did own it prior, they had 1 year to divest it and sell it, okay? They have now created new felony offenses for anybody who acts as like a straw buyer or a straw owner for these entities, okay? Third-degree felony if you purchase land in the state of Utah on behalf of any one of these restricted foreign entities. The interesting part is they also require anybody who has served in the military for any one of these countries. So if we have a veteran of the military of any one of these countries living in the state of Utah and they go to buy a house, they have to divulge that information to the county clerk or county recorder in the county where they're purchasing that property. And if they do not, that they served in the military for those countries. If they do not, that's a third-degree felony for failing to disclose their military service. I could have just used Twisted Sister for basically every one of my bills here today. We are not going to take it anymore. These restricted foreign entities. We didn't start the fire, but we're trying to fight it. Thinking, I already heard this song. And you'd be right. Because House Bill 436, word for word, was exactly part of what was included in House Bill 354. They passed the same bill twice, but House Bill 436 is just the DUI purpose of it. It's all contained in 354, word for word exactly, is what's in 436. This really is going to apply to your law enforcement more than you. But there's a ton of data that they have to collect to put in the annual DUI report that goes to the legislature every year. Raise your hand if you knew that there was an annual report that went to the legislature on DUI every year. There is. CCJJ compiles that and submits it to the legislature every year with tons of stats. The good news is the vast majority of that information that they're requiring is actually already in the report every year. It's actually already there. I'm going to put another plug out. The legislature's asking for all sorts of data and they have no flipping clue what they even want. They're just throwing spaghetti at the wall saying, we're going to make you do this, we're going to make you do that. We need to start getting involved in helping them shape what they want. When they put out language and we come in and say that doesn't really work, their response is, what do they say, Megan? What has Wilcox said, especially? Why are you afraid of data? What? Right? Yeah, it does. And
the problem too, you ask him, for what purpose? What is it that you're looking for? He has no clue.
And he says, why are you afraid of data, Jeff? Yeah. Right? Like, so we need to probably do a better job of helping educate them leading up to this, not waiting until language comes out, but like, look, legislature, what do you want? And then we help them go get it. Even if it isn't convenient for us, if we can help guide these discussions, it's probably going to be better for us in the long run, but it certainly will be more effective on the data they want. Jeff?
The biggest problem, we have no problem giving them whatever.
Yeah.
But it costs us money.
Absolutely.
And they're not funding any of this. So then we need to go to our commissions and get them, or councils and get that money. And we're not getting that money. It costs money.
So Jeff, for those online who probably can't hear, talked about the money involved. The legislature's not funding this, not giving us any money to collect this data, and the county commissions and councils are having a hard time funding it, and that's absolutely true. But it's just something we got to do, and they want it all. Ha, yes, I love this one. That's what all our interdicted persons are saying. Don't stop me now. Well, here we go. House Bill 437, interdicted persons. This is, as it started out, and it got whittled down a little bit, but as it started out, it was going to be a pretty big deal. It's still a pretty big deal, and it's going to have a pretty good impact on DUI offenders and people who are convicted of DUI. So this is a delayed implementation. Doesn't go into effect until January 1 of 2026. So at the beginning of next year, this goes into effect. Here's what happens. To understand this bill, we got to understand Title 32B, the Alcohol Beverage Control Act, has a provision in there where it's a Class B misdemeanor for an interdicted person to purchase or possess alcohol, or for somebody to sell alcohol to an interdicted person. An interdicted person is basically somebody that, because of law or a court order, can't have alcohol. Okay? This expands who interdicted persons are pretty greatly. And let me tell you why. So, if you have somebody who's convicted of any of the following offenses, it is mandatory for the court to order them as an interdicted person as part of their order, as part of the sentence. Any extreme DUI. So we know what that is, right? Over a 1.6, over an 0.5 plus controlled substance, 2 or more controlled substances, okay? Any felony DUI, where we have 2 priors, and it becomes a felony on the 3rd DUI, negligently operating a vehicle causing injury, an automobile homicide, and then refusing a chemical test, that would have applied to any one of those circumstances. Okay, so if we're charging him with refusal, even if it would have been one of these, it's going to count. The court must order them as an interdicted person. It makes it illegal for them to possess alcohol during the term of their interdiction. The term of the interdiction is generally the time of their probation. Courts do have the ability to shorten that. They do not have the ability to not order it. It is mandatory. Okay? They can say, I'm going to order you as an interdicted person for a day, I guess, if they wanted to. But they have to make the order. So what does this mean? And why does McLovin have a do not sell on his license? And this big giant A that might as well be the logo for the great Crimson Tide of Alabama, right, Trent? Is that Alabama's logo?
No, Tyson. You know
It's
better.
not. Here's what has to happen. If your court orders somebody as an interdicted person, they must order that the person physically surrenders their driver license to the court at that time. They have to physically surrender their driver license to the court. The court will send it to DLD, and if that person wants to reinstate their driver license as an interdicted person, they will get a special new driver license that in a red ribbon across the top says do not sell. So if they go to try and purchase alcohol, it won't just be a scan on the license and some show up as an interdicted person. It is the new scarlet letter. It will show right on the front of their license that they are an interdicted person and they cannot sell. Now when they come off their interdicted status, they can go back to DLD and get a regular driver license back. But for the term of that interdiction, it will have this. So this will have a big impact on people being able to possess alcohol, right? It's not only just, if they're an interdicted person, it's not only just a violation of their probation anymore that they're consuming alcohol, it's a new Class B misdemeanor to even possess it, okay? Any other DUI offense that I didn't list, it's permissive. It's a may. You can get them ordered as an interdicted person, but for the other ones that we mentioned, it's a shall. It has to happen. I think that covers it.
Ah, your passion for DUI is unmatched. Put that up against anybody.
Heck yeah.
House Bill 477. That is Sarah Bareilles, title of the song, King of Anything. Who cares if you disagree at a school board meeting? House Bill 477 addresses school trespass. They amended some definitions. According to the legislator who presented this, he said, technically, the way the statute was worded, we couldn't have arrested anybody for school trespass. So they made some definitional adjustments, also made it clear that if someone is showing up to a school board meeting and they're disagreeing with the school board, that's not sufficient to charge them with trespass. House Bill 562 And me.
And you.
That is, of course, our boy Johnny Cash. Now, when we go through training to become instructors, we're essentially told when you're presenting something, limit it to about 3 things. We're up here on number 47-ish.
Ish.
If I were to impress upon you 3 things, this would be one of them. This deals with pretrial detention, House Bill 562. Going to want to take a look at this if you ever deal with pretrial detention. I'm going to try and list off a few things that are related to this. 1, material change in circumstances. This makes it clear that if at a preliminary hearing there's more evidence put in front of a judge they didn't know before, that's a material change in circumstances. 2nd, this requires a court to order pretrial detention for someone who's arrested on a felony and is a habitual offender, which we know we've got that really strict definition we heard before, 9 cases and 5 convictions and 5 years. But we added the misdemeanors as well, so we may get more of that. This also clarifies that a request for pretrial release that was not fully presented to and ruled on by the judge at an initial appearance doesn't qualify as a pretrial detention hearing. This also requires a court to support a pretrial detention order with findings of fact regarding dangerousness and/or risk of flight. This also reintroduces a uniform bail schedule. We've been on this pendulum back and forth with our uniform bail schedule. It's back again as a default for judges to look at. This requires prosecutors in a motion for pretrial detention to include any information that's favorable to the defendant. So if you have mitigating information that you've gotten since you looked at the case, or the report from the officer includes some mitigating information, that has to be included in your motion for pretrial detention. This also requires a judge who's unable to hold a detention hearing within 14 days of a defendant's first appearance to make a good faith effort to find another judge to hear that within 14 days. And this prevents a court from modifying a pretrial status order to a no bail hold based solely on a defendant's failure to appear. A lot going on in this one. So if you have anything to do with pretrial detention, this is one your brain may be fried by now. I'm going to come back to because this is a lot for pretrial detention. Senate Bill 24. This is Journey. Title of the song is Don't Stop Believing. And of course, this is Eric Clark, who stepped out of the room when I'm trying to give him some credit. Thank you, Eric. But this is an ode to Eric for protecting all of our ginger children. This, Senate Bill 24, I use the song Don't Stop Believing. This is a good evidence of what we can accomplish when we identify an issue, get a legislator on board, and take it to the legislature, because this is a big deal. Got a new statute passed that makes it a first-degree felony for child torture. So if we have somebody who intentionally or knowingly inflicts or causes or permits another to inflict serious injury, notice physical or bodily was taken out. Serious injury inflicted in an exceptionally cruel or depraved manner, or serious injury as part of a course of conduct over a prolonged period of time. 10 years is the new baseline for that first-degree felony. A judge can deviate from that, But we not only have this new first-degree felony, baseline is 10 years. This was obviously brought about by the Ruby Franke, Jolie Hildebrandt case. A lot of people were alarmed and surprised outside of us to find out that somebody with no criminal history charged with some horrible second-degree felonies has a probation recommendation after a pre-sentence investigation. So thankfully, problem identified. This, I know, was kind of a battle, but in the end, we got a lot of support from the legislature on this one. So good job, Eric, wherever you are.
This is going to be the test. Does anybody know who that is singing? Nobody? Oh, none of you get lunch. I didn't know this song existed. A lot of these songs just came naturally. This one, not so much. I asked Google to find me a song on trespassing, and Adam Lambert has a song named Trespassing. What do you know? So here we are. Legislature created, so we've been seeing stories about this all around the country, squatters, right? And some of the fraud that they perpetrate on properties and other things. The Utah legislature is, again, we're not going to take it. And so they have made some new laws on property damage and destruction by trespassers. It's a felony 2 offense, okay? We got a secondary felony here. If they enter or remain unlawfully on real property, and then they cause damage or pecuniary loss of $1,500 or more. So if you've got a trespasser that enters and or remains unlawfully, creates $1,500 or more of property damage on real property, that's a second-degree felony. All right? Don't have to do a lot of damage to get $1,500 anymore these days. So you have that. There's a ton of stuff in regards to law enforcement and their ability to remove people now, but we're not going to talk about that here. I'll talk to your sheriffs and police officers about that as we go around the state.
I know that.
That is Morgan Wallen. Last night, we let the liquor talk. What you need to make sure is that you don't let the liquor talk when you're speaking with a child abuse or a child welfare worker. This, because of the problems we've had with people both threatening and assaulting child welfare workers, those got bumped up a degree. So if you have a threat case or an assault case that involves a child welfare worker, recognize that's 1 degree up from what it used to be.
Because all the protections for police service canines are no longer reserved to just dogs. Any police service animal. So if one of your departments has a police service tiger, if somebody were to abuse it, it would have the same protections and enhancements as a dog. Maybe you got a police service turtle. I don't know. It could be any animal. Okay? A public safety animal is defined as an animal that a public safety organization, so any of your public safety organizations, owns or uses under contract, so they either own it or they have it under contract, and it is used to assist with the duties of the public safety organization. So whatever that animal is, your betta fish, if somebody abuses that betta fish, it counts the same as it does for police dogs.
I'm so excited about this because it's not just law enforcement.
No.
So prosecution offices, you can have your mascot. We can have our Iron County chinchilla. We can have Paul Fuller's bear that he takes to court for his therapy. Really excited to see where we go with this. UPC,
Bob Church's betta fish.
we're still in discussions. We've got the beta fish.
Cougars down here.
Yeah.
Cougars and cougar tails. I hear.
Senate Bill 82, I'm about to cause a riff in the room. This is, who here dares to raise their hand and admit that they like Nickelback? Thank you. It's good music.
Not surprising.
All these haters. This song is called Photograph. Eric, thanks for joining us after I spent 5 minutes giving an ode to Eric Clark. It's fine, it's fine. Senate Bill 82, autopsy photo amendments. This stemmed from a case where there was a family who lost a loved one and found out that a consultant the defense had used years later was using photographs of their lost family member to train other people. They didn't like it. So now we have this. So there's limitations on when we can use autopsy photographs, can be used for legitimate law enforcement purposes and training, so long as we've de-identified the person. So recognize our use of this likely will not change, but if you see somebody else using this, if it wasn't public, there is now a charge associated with it.
So RIP to Toby Keith, right? Just passed away not too long ago. Certain DUI offenders who are involved in certain problem-solving courts have the ability by their participation in successful completion of those problem-solving courts to get their driver license back and reinstated earlier. Veterans treatment courts were added to that list. So veteran treatment courts that certain DUI offenders who are in, if they're successfully participating in that, they can get their license reinstated more quickly than they otherwise would have.
Senate Bill 90, jailhouse rock by. Yeah, the legislature doesn't want people missing out on the good times that are had in jail for certain offenders. So this actually creates a really, really limited mandatory sentence provision. So if someone commits theft, they're deported, they get charged with aggravated reentry, and then they commit the same type of crime, whether it's drug or theft, they're going to have a minimum mandatory sentence. If that is a felony, 360 days. If it is a Class A, 360, Class B, 180, 90 days for a Class C. So if you have that lineup, drug or theft, deported, charged with and convicted for aggravated reentry, now they're committing the same offense again, there's going to be an associated minimum mandatory. They want them, instead of having a revolving door, to actually have to serve time for those offenses.
See, I came here because I thought Kent was going to be able to nail this one. Warrant, right? This is warrant. And so Senate Bill 110 deals with warrants. Why else would we be listening to warrant here at the conference today, right? So, on cases where we have a fail to file, okay? We don't file in time, they let a person out, and we don't file within 60 days. But we do end up filing after that 60-day period. There is a statutory presumption now that that person will be brought to court by summons and not by warrant. So if you do a fail to file, the person gets out of jail, you take over 60 days to file, which doesn't happen often, but it happens enough, right? These happen, especially on super complicated cases at times. There's a presumption that you will not be able to rely on a warrant to bring that person to court. Okay, you're going to have to bring them by summons. We can overcome that. That if the defendant fails to appear on the summons is unable to be served after good faith, or there's good cause to show that the defendant is a safety risk. So we can go to the court and try to overcome that presumption, but the presumption is that it will be coming by summons, not by warrant.
What is the dance to this song?
Who can do it? Alyssa.
Any of y'all have to do this in your elementary school dances? Totally did. Dance card and everything. Senate Bill 123. This makes it so that if a victim's residence on a protective order is protected, one of the provisions of the protective order also has to be, judge has to put it in there, that the respondent can't mess around with the utilities. So we have some of our respondents who try and figure out ways around these protective orders. How can I still mess with them? I'm gonna go jack up the utilities, turn off the power. Now that's going to be a violation. Just make sure when we're getting these issued that the judge is including that in accordance with this statute.
The reason why you never come back from Copperhead Road is because there's a lot of copper there and maybe some catalytic converters. And that's what this bill is about. The theft statute has always been kind of a mess. And when they recodified it, they made it a little bit easier to navigate, but not much. And we still had these enhancements for copper and other suspect metals and catalytic converters, which made it an automatic felony if you stole a catalytic converter. All that's been pulled out and put into their own statutes. So if you're looking for theft of a catalytic converter, it's no longer in the general theft statute. You're going to look for it in its own statute. None of the provisions otherwise changed. It's kind of like a mini recodification with that.
Senate Bill 140. That song is sung by Carly Rae Jepsen. So this bill is about the phone call we've all been dying to make. After dismissing a case or after having an acquittal, we've all wanted to just pick up the phone and call the defendant and have a chat. This bill requires cases where DNA was collected at booking, which is typically going to be on a felony, and then that case is filed but later dismissed with prejudice or they're acquitted. This statute says the filing attorney shall notify the defendant of the procedure to get that DNA destroyed. So I know I just met you and I just called you a pedophile in court, but here's how you get your DNA destroyed. If it's me, I'm probably going with a letter. If they still have an attorney on file, I'm probably sending it to them. But if you want to call. Not like us, again, Trent. There's only so many songs about pedophiles, guys. Senate Bill 144 and House Bill 207 were essentially the same thing, but one had a fiscal note. In the end, they both got passed, so we can talk about both of them. One of the biggest wins of this, if someone already has a conviction for a sex offense and they get another, 5 years added to the minimum. So a lot of times we go in there and battle with defense attorneys and they're like, well, they have all this discretion. They could go all the way up to 15 years. They could go all the way up to 99. But then, as we all know, 5 years later, they've served their sentence, they're out. This adds 5 years to the minimum if they have a previous conviction. This also clears up some definitions. So, sexually explicit conduct now is modified to include certain bodily functions for those weirdos. We also have CSAM was expanded to include minors observing or being used for sexually explicit conduct. And finally, for those of you whose 9th grade health class failed you, we finally have a definition for female breast. So if you didn't know, it's now in statute.
It was written by a man. because I'm also unapologetically country as hell. We're going back. What's your question, Jeff?
I just wanted to note on that last one, that's nice bill. We also tried to get through a resolution to change and create Rule 404D to permit us to introduce prior sexual offenses in adult cases. And quite frankly, I mean, this means little until we can actually introduce evidence like we can in child sex molestation cases. And it got through committees, placed through the committees, and then put last on the last day, and they didn't get to it.
Yeah.
And one thing I encourage everybody is to contact your legislators, let them know that we're still going to be pushing this, and we may even push it into interim committee this time. So, but it's frustrating because all these bills and some of the most important ones they can't get through.
Yeah. So Jeff Gray just mentioned one of the bills that did not pass this year was a push to have 404D evidence in prior acts on that. Work with your legislators. There's going to be more coming out on that. I mean, that's something that absolutely is going to be addressed as we move forward, but that will help in with what we were just talking about before on Trent's bill. All right, Wes Bingham, I'm looking at you. Where's that picture taken?
Down by Equal and Anti.
Okay, I need more specifics than that from a San Pete County guy. That's up on the Skyline Drive, yeah, absolutely. So, Senate Bill 149, this really, like, again, I just get to choose what I want to talk about when I come here. So a lot of you aren't going to handle poaching cases and guiding illegal outfitters. Some of you do. Ben Willoughby, where are you at? Casey Jukes just had one. That's what I want to talk to you about, Casey. So yeah, you deal with these things, right? Especially in our rural areas. This is one that's delayed until January or July 1st, but it's not good. The hunting season is until after that. Deals with guiding and outfitting, and they're now under the DWR. They're no longer under DOPL for their licenses. Any violations can be criminal violations now. We're not relying on DOPL to do a lot of stuff with their licensing. And now, instead of only being able to have one compensated guide or spotter, you can have two. So last year, I bought these girls dinner, so I technically compensated them, but it wasn't above the threshold, so we're good. And for those keeping track at home, one of these loves Halloween and the other one's an absolutely crappy driver.
This song is from the movie Breakfast Club. It's called Don't You Forget About Me. This is for our juvenile prosecutors. And forget about you. This is related to juvenile adjudications, specifically non-judicial adjustments. So up front, if you're going to offer one of these, a lot of our minors, juveniles may not realize how great a non-judicial adjustment is, and they may turn it down and move forward in the process and think, holy crap, I just made a huge mistake. Well, now, if they say they're going to decline, they actually have to consult with an attorney before giving their official declination, which hopefully results in more non-judicial adjustments.
Our defendants are saying more community service, more problems, right? Well, inflation is not just for eggs, as my good friend Ryan would say. And the going rate for community service is no longer $10 per hour. It's now $12 per hour. So your defendants will be able to work it off at a little bit shorter clip.
That is our boy, Meatloaf. So many of our abusers would do anything for love, except admit that they abuse. Thus, we have the no-fault protective order. The theory behind this is a protective order that can be obtained so long as both parties agree and they cannot be against each other. You can't have mutual no-fault protective orders. But the idea is there are a lot of abusers in the world, a lot of respondents that would otherwise agree to a protective order, except for the fact that a judge is going to put on a record that the abuse has occurred or there's a substantial likelihood of abuse occurring in the future. And they really don't want that on the record. They're worried about their job, their clearance, whatever it may be. So defense attorneys are claiming there will be a lot more that would readily agree to a no-fault protective order because it includes none of those findings. So keep that in mind if you're advising people who are trying to obtain protective orders. May be an easier avenue without having a long, drawn-out hearing regarding potential abuse.
But I was going to allow a presentation where we were playing lots of songs where the greatest band in the history of the world was not going to be represented. All right? Thank you, Christian Ellie. Metallica, I will die on that hill any day with any of you. And we could talk about that tomorrow at lunch.
Nickelback?
Child, please. Okay, Senate Bill 194, defendants' access to evidence and amendments. Here's the thing. The legislature's passed a law, and again, this isn't going to impact you necessarily directly, but there are some downstream impacts as you're counseling your sheriffs in jails as county attorneys, but also as you have defendants in jail that are awaiting trial, sentencing, or another disposition. They have a right to review their evidence in their case. And the legislature has now mandated that sheriffs have to make the ability of defendants in those situations, you have to create a space for them to be able to view their evidence with or without counsel. Okay? They are going to have the right to be able to review evidence. So a private space where they can go in and either electronically or physically review evidence in a case. There are some guardrails here. It's not just a free-for-all. This isn't what their jail cells are going to look like, hopefully. That's not what your sheriffs end up doing, right? But there are guardrails in place on what can be left with them, what can't be left with them, the types of spaces they need. But they do have the right under this statute to be able to review their evidence in their case with or without counsel present. Okay? So just be aware of that. It's going to be happening. Sad but true, it's happening.
Couldn't have a presentation with music without the best musical of all time represented, which is, of course, Hamilton. Hey, wicked second, all right? So, this was already covered very well, talking about Rippy. SJR 10, this gives us our new-ish way of addressing plea withdrawal. I just wanted to say very quickly, this was almost a complete disaster as well. Were it not for people rallying, were it not for prosecutors across the state contacting people, David and others showing up to testify about what it would look like if defendants had 30 days post-sentencing to withdraw pleas. So this may feel like, God, we're going to have more direct appeals. This could have been a lot worse. So thank you to everyone who rallied for this. This, I think, with where it looked like it was heading, is definitely a win.
Y'all gonna make me lose my cool up in here. So I asked AI to give me a picture of Trent Dressen after he just found out that he'd been referred to the Prosecutor Conduct Commission. And this is what I came up with. Okay, so, all right. Before I dive into this, I have selective filtering. I'm really, really good at a filter when I want to, and I don't really want to on this one. So if something comes out, I can't be held responsible. I'll give all the disclaimers. This is not the opinion of the Utah Prosecution Council, the Utah Attorney General's Office, SWAP, Statewide Association of Prosecutors. This is only Tyson Skeen who's saying this right now, okay? And take it for what it's worth. So, in a year where the legislature was very clear that they didn't have money, we're not going to fund any new programs. We actually don't even have enough to fund SANE nurses and the work that they're doing, and domestic violence coalitions, and all this other stuff. They somehow found a way to have almost $500,000 to create a new commission to oversee prosecutors in the state of Utah. I get it. We're all just horrible, apparently. And this oversight of prosecutors is apparently more important than funding SANE nurses and the work that they do in sexual assault cases, at least according to our legislature in the state of Utah now. Okay? There is a newly created commission at CCJJ. It will be housed at CCJJ. So if anybody's looking for a new gig, maybe you can be the director of the newly minted Prosecutor Conduct Commission. It started out as the Prosecutor Misconduct Commission, but they never updated the name of the bill, so it stayed that. But now it's called the Prosecutor Conduct Commission. Honestly, the way that this started out was complete crap. And the way it was written was complete crap. And it's still kind of crappy, but it's not complete crap anymore. It's just kind of crap. And honestly, if they wouldn't have given us all this lip service about money and budget, I probably wouldn't care all that much about this bill, to be perfectly honest with you. Because honestly, if we go out and we're committing professional misconduct, I think we should be held accountable. I don't have a problem with that. But to tell us that there's no money, we can't fund, Bob's been trying to get a domestic violence resource prosecutor at UPC for 2 years now. There's no money for that. But guess what? There is money for. Okay? So yeah, I'm not bitter at all about this, people. So let me tell you about what this commission is. Here's who's on the commission. An assistant attorney general engaged in prosecution, a county prosecutor appointed by SWAP, a municipal prosecutor appointed by SWAP, a retired criminal defense attorney appointed by CCJJ, and 2 retired district or appellate court judges appointed by the governor. That's your commission. Okay? All of these people are subject to confirmation by the Senate. So the various people appoint them, the Senate will confirm them. That will be your new Prosecutor Conduct Commission. The way it started was a bunch of defense attorneys.
And 4 legislators.
And 4 legislators. So again, this is better, right, to be able to look at this. So let's talk about what professional misconduct is. You might be asking about professional misconduct. It means committed in the course of a prosecution. So in the course of your prosecution, you purposefully, knowingly, or recklessly violate a clear and unambiguous legal obligation or professional standard for prosecuting attorneys. Okay, that's the first prong. And it impacted or reasonably could have impacted the substantive or procedural due rights of an individual. Now you might be asking yourselves, if one of us does that in here, I'm fine with us being held accountable. I have no problem with that. If one of us does that, we probably ought to not be a prosecutor anymore. But guess what this commission has no power to do? Make you not a prosecutor anymore. They have the ability that if a complaint comes in and they do an investigation and they find that you purposefully, knowingly, or recklessly violated a clear and unambiguous legal standard or professional responsibility for prosecutors and it impacted the rights of a person, you know what they can do? They can let the bar know and they can let your employer know. That's their power. And that's what we're spending all this money on that we could have given to SANE nurses. I keep coming back to that because that's the one that really pisses me off, if I'm being totally honest with you. So that's what our legislature thinks, okay? So here's what you need to know. We have this commission. They can take complaints from anybody, defense attorneys, judges, the general public, anybody who wants to file a complaint with this commission, they can. They're only hearing complaints on Class B misdemeanors and above. So Class C misdemeanor and infraction cases do not count. So when you go to jury trial and you're throwing a lighted material from a vehicle, you're going to be okay on those, okay? The powers of this commission, they do have subpoena power. They can subpoena you. They can subpoena other witnesses. This legislation mandates that your employer and you have to cooperate with this commission. The only thing that can keep you from not testifying honestly if you get subpoenaed on your own case here is if you're exercising your Fifth Amendment rights to not incriminate yourself in a criminal matter. Okay? That's the only time they accept it. Otherwise, they're saying you have to participate in these. You have to be cooperating in these. You can't just say, I'm not going to go. Okay? What the penalty for that is, because we've had a couple times where it's like, well, what if you don't? This can be grounds for termination by your employer. Now, it's not mandatory termination, but under the, even as a merit employee, if you don't comply with the Prosecutor Conduct Commission and how they're doing and cooperate with it, they will refer that back to your employer, and under the law, it can be, you can be disciplined up to termination. Okay? So this is a big deal. It can be a big deal for your stress level. The standard that they have to find is by preponderance of the evidence. So we don't have a high standard here. It's the lowest, it's that 50-50 standard. Just tilt it one way just a little bit, and if it shows that you've committed professional misconduct by the preponderance of the evidence, the commission must notify your employer. If it's a criminal act, they must notify law enforcement, and then they must notify the Office of Professional Conduct at the bar. Okay? Some things that maybe are good. These records that are created by the commission, they are protected. All right? They are considered protected documents, so people can't get them outside of the commission. They're not public record, things with that. Even if they find that you've committed professional misconduct, they only have the authority to release them to those entities. They don't have the ability to publicize them, put them in the paper, anything like that. Okay? They can initiate investigations. They can take oaths. They can take evidence. They can disclose to current employers what's going on. And I think we talked about all this as we're doing this. Yes?
I can't remember, does the bill talk about attorney-client privilege?
I do believe there was something in there in regards to attorney-client privilege and with that, but that's going to be kind of challenging in a lot of cases on this.
I would just say, if you're ever called up to this, you should be talking with your county attorney about that, because that suit can waive, you can't waive this privilege for the client, and I think that the law, the county attorney can. So that is something that's not addressed whenever you're working.
So Eric Clark, Washington County, just said, if you are called up to this, you need to talk to your county attorney, because if you're working in under a county attorney, you don't have the ability to waive attorney-client privilege. The county attorney would have the ability to do that.
Thanks for being here for Tyson's bill, Eric. That's great.
I really appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. Jeff?
The biggest complaints, or the complaints we're going to see, are at least according to the sponsor, what the sponsor is concerned about is discovery violations. Because everything's a Brady violation, right? And so that's probably going to be the number one battleground of these kind of complaints. Whether or not we violated discovery. We've got clear discovery obligations.
Yeah.
But as we all know, most of our problems with discovery is just getting it from law enforcement.
Sure. So Jeff's comment, for those online who can't hear, the main complaint from the bill sponsor, Senator Todd Weiler, for anybody who's interested in knowing. Take that information, and elections have consequences. Discovery violations are probably the biggest thing that they anticipate hearing here, because it's a good thing we have a commission now, though, Jeff, because there's no remedy for discovery violations in the law. Like, we don't have any remedy for discovery violations, so I'm really glad the legislature created this commission so that they now actually have something they can do about discovery, right? Again, and this is a big deal. It kind of sucks that this is our last bill, to be honest, because it is super important, but it ends on kind of a downer a little bit. Trent?
I think before we end, can you just tell them how you feel about Senate Bill 318? Just let the people know.
I think it's a complete crap. No, so does anybody have any questions? Thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do. What we do matters, okay? We make a difference. And when you hear people attack us like Senator Weiler did on some of this stuff, it hits personal, right? Because we put our heart and soul into this, and we're trying to do what's right. And I'm not saying that prosecutors never make mistakes, because we do. But generally, they're good faith mistakes, and it sucks when people try to attack us on that. So I will say thank you for what you all do. If there's questions, let us know. Trent and I are around. We'll be here tomorrow. Happy to talk about anything. Otherwise, drive safe. Have a great day.